Rita, you have your hand raised.
I still don't see her as having an audio device.
Francis, do you see the speaker?
Do I see what?
I see a speaker by her name. Or a microphone.
No, I don't see one on by her name.
Francis, do you see the speaker?
See what?
I see a
No, I do not see a speaker by her name. Looks like she's gone now. Oh no, still not.
Ms. Lincoln, were we trying to mute someone or?
we're trying to test Rita's microphone.
Okay.
Rita, now try to unmute. You have a microphone symbol now. It shows you as still unmuted or muted.
Okay.
There you are.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Cindy, we ready to begin?
Yes, sir. I believe that Miss Asbury is going to be late.
Okay. Yeah, and I saw that she was told to just kind of introduce herself whenever she joined the meeting. And so we'll begin without her and hopefully she can join us. Welcome to the City of Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment special video meeting for May 6th, 2021. The meeting's disconnected at any time. The meeting shall be stopped and reconvened once a connection is restored. If the connection is not able to be restored within 30 minutes, items remaining for consideration will be continued to the next regularly scheduled Board of Adjustment meeting. The agenda, documents, and minutes are located on okc.primegov.com/public/portal. For anyone wishing to speak on an item today, hopefully you've signed up with city staff already via phone or email, and we'll call on you at the appropriate time. We will call the case, and then I will recognize the applicant or representative to speak, and then I will recognize any supporters, and then any protests, and then we will close with the applicant speaking. Public comment will be closed unless specifically reopened by me or another board member. The board will then deliberate and then vote. And board members, I see that we've just gone full screen, so if you hit escape right now, you should have access to your voting panes. If you have not prearranged with city staff to speak on an item, I will regularly ask if anyone else would like to be heard on a matter. If you'd like to speak and you have not previously signed up, please use the raise your hand function in Zoom while your matter is being considered. The board and staff will be notified that you've raised your hand. Just note that if you've already pre-registered with city staff, you should not need to use the raise your hand function unless for some reason you're not on one of our lists. For speakers other than the applicant, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. If you call in after your item has been heard, or if you have a different matter to raise with the board, you'll be allowed to speak under citizens to be heard. I will ask all participants keep their sound on mute until you're recognized to speak. If you're on a phone, press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Board members will be allowed to ask questions and make comments at any time during the meeting. Please do not interrupt board members while they're speaking because we need a clear record and it makes the meetings go by much faster. Before you begin with your comments, please identify yourself by stating your name and your address. And this meeting's called to order. Ms. Lincoln, can you please call the roll?
Chairman Merchant,
Present.
Member Privet,
Present.
Member Voorhees,
Present.
Member Yabara,
Present.
and Member Asbury is absent until she joins us at a later time.
Okay. We have a quorum.
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is continuance requests or withdrawals, and I believe we have one or two.
I have one today, item 11, it's 14-836. Applicant requests this case be withdrawn.
Okay, was anyone on the line hoping to speak on that application?
Does that go on the planning, JJ? You know?
I think that's what I saw on the in the board packet, that she's going to take that to you guys at planning.
All right, cool.
Yeah, seems appropriate. And we don't need a motion for that, so we'll move on to items on the consent docket, and I don't see any, so we'll move to items requiring a separate vote.
Okay, the first item is one, case 14-828. It's a request of Quail Springs Corporate Park for a variance to the sign regulations to allow a sign within the right-of-way at Quail Springs Parkway and North May Avenue.
Yes, thank you. I'm Brian Hopper. Home address is 1102 Merryman Green, Norman, Oklahoma. However, I am here to talk about the sign variance requested. You can see right there, thank you for putting that up. The location of the sign, it's on North May, just a little west of Quail Springs Mall for a better reference.
And Mr. Hopper, I hate to interrupt you already, but I see that Ms. Hurst has a hand raised. I'm not sure if it's in error or not, but Ms. Hurst, did you have a matter to raise?
Yes, after this case, can we go back and approve the minutes?
Oh, yes. For some reason
Thank
that was not on my list, but we'll continue with Mr. Hopper and then go to the minutes. Thank you.
Thank
That's
you.
great. Okay, so this is the entrance to a corporate park. And the other end of the corporate park has a really nice sign. The Owners Association requested signage on this end of the property. The stores adjacent don't allow for us to put a sign on either side, and so we've designed a sign to be placed on the center median. The center median is maintained by the association. They have the utilities for lighting, water metered for sprinklers. The sign we designed is a fairly substantial size, and so I think the concern was the placement of these large stones. I'm not sure if you're able to zoom in on that upper right portion of that, but yes, that part right there. The blocks are 4 feet wide. We're trying to create a stacked look with a natural stone going across close to the whole median. That'll give a really nice presentation for the entrance to that park. We've gone through the process to apply for all of it. We've gone to all the neighbors, landowners, received no objection. We've gone through to get the waiver from all utilities in the area, and everything is signed off on for that part.
Okay, and what's the total size of this?
The total size, the
16 by something?
yeah, the sign itself or the entire area?
The entire kind of area that's being proposed.
So from the front edge along May to the back of it is, in recollection, about 80 feet. I did not have that measurement right in front of me.
That's okay. And then the sign itself, including the kind of rocks and boulders.
Yeah, the sign itself, the base blocks are 4 feet wide and 8 feet long.
Okay.
And then they're stacked, and then there'll be a stone block going across the top.
And then the total, what's that total height?
The total height, let me hit escape and get to my screen. The total height from curb up is 6.5 feet.
Okay. Yeah, I had in mind a lot higher signs, so that
Yeah,
makes it better.
The base block is 2.5 feet. Half of it will be underground. We do have a concrete footing going underneath to support the structure. And then each block is about 2 feet high.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments? I know this was continued a couple of times. Was that?
It was. We had a change of staff, and so Cindy was very kind in dealing with us being delayed. The delay was on our end with a change of managers more than any objection or issues that we faced.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of times that's people working with protests. So I
Yeah,
didn't.
no, not that I know of. There may be a hand raised, but we've received no objections.
Yeah.
The Owners Association is really excited to get this done.
Okay. Was there anyone on the line that was hoping to speak on this application? I don't have anyone signed up. But we'll wait a couple moments. Okay. Hearing none, board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14828 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes.
I'm not seeing the option to second.
I've
Someone's
added
looking
that
over
for
your
you.
back.
I think they did.
Okay.
How would you like to vote?
I
Member
would
Dwyer?
second.
Okay, and then I think you still need for technicality to, I guess, voice vote in favor even.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. Sorry, I
Okay.
thought we were still on the second.
Okay, and the application's approved.
Wonderful. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks.
I flew right past the minutes, so we'll go back to receiving the minutes from the April 15th, 2021 meeting. Do we have any changes or do we have a motion to approve?
I'll move approval.
Second
I'll second.
or not.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to receive the
I have
minutes.
a button now.
Good.
Sorry,
A motion
Mike.
and a second to receive the minutes from the April 15th, 2021 meeting. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And I didn't see the confirmation. And I've
It
been
was
told.
approved unanimously.
Okay,
I apologize.
that's okay. I've been told I have to do that before moving on. So, and the minutes are received. So we'll move back to item number 2 under items requiring a separate vote.
Okay, item 2 is case 14780. It's a request of Kevin Craig for a variance of the side yard setback and maximum lot coverage for accessory buildings located at 10670 Northwest 107th Street.
Mr. Craig, I think I saw you. If you wanted to introduce yourself again, just for the purposes of the record, and then present your application.
Thank you very much. Yes, my name is Kevin Craig. I reside at 1670 Northwest 107th Street. I see we've got a big agenda. I'll just get into the changes from last meeting. There was a couple takeaways I took away from our last meeting. One, the request was still a little large, and then try to gain some more of my neighbor's support as we've had a couple protest letters. I was able to meet with the McCaslins briefly. I was able to catch them outside. We had a tentative meeting that following week to sit down and discuss my plans. I did receive a text message. Basically, they backed out of our meeting, and they essentially just said they didn't see the point. And looking at my plans. So since I wasn't able to discuss it with them, I did go around my original support letter that I had submitted. I just went to my closest neighbors. I've since went out going door to door in the entire neighborhood. I'm currently up to 64 signatures, and I think at least 3 support emails. And then I also been trying to meet the 20-foot setback that kind of seemed to be a unanimous recommendation by the board. Was able to make the building slightly narrower to reduce my request from 15 feet to 20 feet there on the east. No, sorry, that'd be the west property line. And reduce the total square footage down to 1764, which is a reduction of 44% from our original submittal.
So is that for, just to help clarify, because the summary exhibit there seemed to conflict with some of the notes from the application and the staff report. I wasn't sure if that's just because some of these notes are old or what, but 1764, is that total or is that just for the shop?
Well, that's total. So I've got the breakdown. 1344 would be under roof of the shop, and 420 is the open patio.
Okay, so we don't have the accessory building issues anymore.
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
We don't have those accessory building issues anymore. I think there was kind of originally there was a larger and a smaller accessory building that was going to be added.
Yeah, so originally, I went at this process with kind of a whole future, backyard plan, just to try to prevent having to go through this process more than once. Yes, so we've eliminated another outbuilding and a pergola from this application.
Okay.
Which is represented by this drawing here.
Okay.
In front of you.
And then the setback requirement is 25 feet, and it looks like you say you're going to meet 20, so you only need a 5-foot variance on that now. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and I don't know if you can tell, we mentioned this a little bit in other meetings. So the shop isn't going to be parallel. Well, I hope it's not too, for aesthetic reasons, and then to be able to use the drive more effectively. It's not parallel along with my west property line, so that the 20 feet would only be at the far back corner. The front of the building to my property line would be closer to probably 24.
Okay.
It's not it wouldn't be 20 feet all along the side of the building.
So maximum would be 20 feet. It sounds like.
However you want.
Okay. And are you aware of any current protests that you want to address now? I don't know if there's what's going to happen when we open it up, but if you're aware, you might as well address it now.
I mean, I'm only aware of 2 of the standing protests from the McCaslins, who are my immediate neighbor. To my knowledge, they have not attended any of the previous meetings. I don't know if they're on today, but I don't even know if they've seen my plans. Again, I've tried to talk to them, and they're just not interested in discussing it with me. And then the only other one I'm aware of is her name's Laverne Stroh, and she's on the board, the HOA board.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments of the applicant?
That second protest that you mentioned from a board member, is that her personally, or is she the one that submitted the protest from the HOA board?
Yes.
Or has that been addressed?
I mean, there's really, I don't know what I can address with them. I mean, when I originally filed this application, I asked if I could submit our covenants to as evidence. I was told that the city didn't get involved with HOA disputes. I mean, that's why I've been going door to door. I'm up to what, 67 people in support. If the board would be willing to grant me some more time, I would be glad to keep going door to door and get more support.
Yeah, Mr. Barrow, I'm not sure of a new protest letter based on the revised application from the HOA. But
That's
we're-
what I was getting at. I didn't appropriately phrase that, but that was my question. Because
Yeah.
I know that there was one on a prior application.
Yeah, and our board packet just sort of includes all the older stuff as a part of the record, even though the application gets revised. So we'll see whenever we open it up to other comments, whether there's still objections based on the revised application. I don't know how much weight the objections are going to have from prior applications because it has been revised pretty substantially. But with that, before we move to any protests, board members, any questions or comments of the applicant before we move on to protests? Okay. Cindy, did you have anyone sign up to speak on this application?
I did not.
Okay, I didn't see anyone. Is there anyone on the line that was hoping to speak on this application, either in support or opposition? Go ahead and use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Okay, I'm not seeing any. Cindy, did you receive any?
I didn't see any.
Okay. With that, Mr. Craig, I appreciate you kind of working with us and trying to get as close as you can to what the guidelines and what the code requires. I'll tell the board how I see this application now. He's allowed 1,250 square feet or 2.5% on the square footage side, and the revised renderings, the shop is 100 square feet above that. So that's not a very large variance there, which to me leads us to that open patio, that covered patio being considered in this square footage. This application, that covered patio is going to be facing the interior side of the yard of that house. The neighbors really aren't going to see it that much. It's not really a height issue. It's not really a size issue, particularly with this application. I mean, there's some of those arguments, but just because it's a little bit larger than what the code required, but not much, only about 100 square feet. So given all of that, and the fact that we told him last week that we could get on board with a smaller, or last meeting that we could get on board with a smaller setback variance, I think he's done that. And so I can get on board with this application. I think it's a reasonable request for the board, but I'm only one board member. Those are my current thoughts. Any other comments?
I agree. I think we're finally there. I can get on with this one.
Okay. Any other questions, comments, or a motion?
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. We've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14780 for the reason that they meet statutory conditions for variances. I do want to say these would be based on the applicant's exhibit and the square footage that he presented in the exhibit. I know in the packet it references an accessory building, 1,500 square foot shop, 500 square foot covered patio, 200 square foot accessory building. According to the applicant, that's not accurate, and what he's proposing is 1,700, I think 64 square feet. So given that caveat, we've got a motion in a second to approve the variance requests, and once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 3, case 14843, request of Charney Properties for a variance to the requirement that new mobile home parks take access from at least a minor arterial located at 8021 Melrose Lane.
Good afternoon, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive, here on behalf of the applicant. This is a bit of a unique application. What we seek today is a variance to the requirement that this mobile home park, which is already zoned, have access to a minor arterial. The reason that I say it's unique is the minor arterial classification is a classification of Melrose, the street Melrose, which is outside of our control or purview. If you look at the aerial, Cindy, could you put the aerial up, please? That'll work. Good. Go back one more, please. So Melrose, which is the east-west street, dies at the subject property. It is no longer improved from the eastern property line going west. Also, Davis Avenue, which is the north-south street, is unimproved from Melrose up until where you see the homes that are built. So this is already zoned. It's been zoned for quite some time to allow mobile home park. The issue is, at the time in which it was zoned, Melrose was not improved and neither was Davis. So if we walk our way through the conditions that the statute requires, the application of the ordinance creates a hardship here because it would prohibit the ability of the property owner from developing its site subject to a zoning classification that the legislative body of the city approved. The conditions are peculiar. If you had a, Cindy, could you go to the aerial that's in the case map as part of the staff produced? One of the reasons for the class, there you go. You're right there. The reason that Melrose is not considered a minor arterial is because if you look at the western property line of the subject, to the west of that is a city-owned park, okay? In fact, in your staff report, there's a comment under parks asking for a pedestrian connection from the development to that park. We agree with that. The reason, though, that is significant is because Melrose doesn't connect anywhere to the west, there is never an instance in which it could be considered a minor or arterial, because for a minor arterial, it would need to connect to something else. And of course, Melrose is a very short stretch from council basically to the subject property. However, if we think about the classification, what's really at issue with the requirement in the ordinance is to ensure that the site has adequate street infrastructure. And so what the staff has asked is that we improve Melrose to industrial standards. My client does agree to that. So even though Melrose won't be and can never be considered a minor arterial, once we improve Melrose to industrial standards, it's actually going to be of a higher quality than what you would expect a traditional minor arterial to be. And so when we move to the, C, relief if granted would not cause substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes and intent of the ordinance or comp plan. To the contrary, I think we're actually creating a public benefit in that the city and all of these nearby property owners are going to be able to receive improved public right-of-way infrastructure at the sole cost of a private developer. So the developer is going to be responsible for paying to improve Melrose to industrial standards. There's a comment in there that they want us to limit the delivery and when mobile homes leave the site to the Melrose access point only, because that is obviously where the industrial standard street will be. We do agree to that. Davis Avenue will be a secondary access point. The final condition in the statutes that this would be the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship. Of course, all other code provisions will be met. And again, we're actually going to be improving Melrose Lane to a standard higher than what you would consider a traditional minor arterial to be. So there are several protest letters, all of which are fairly standard. One property owner that owns a significant number of rental units in that area, my understanding, went door to door seeking support for his opposition to this. My guess is a lot of that has to deal with the fact that it's a mobile home park. I want to make sure we kind of parse out the issues here. The only thing for the board to consider is the variance as it relates to Melrose, not being a minor arterial. And again, it's a unique circumstance. It can never be considered a minor arterial because it dies at the park. But again, if we think about the purpose of that ordinance provision is to ensure that adequate public street infrastructure is in place for a use like this because of the nature of heavy equipment bringing the mobile home park or mobile homes there and then taking them off site. So the fact that we're actually going to improve this to industrial standards certainly gets to the spirit and intent of the ordinance. Now, a lot of the protest also seems to stem from the idea that they don't want Davis Avenue to connect to Melrose because right now there are barricades there. And while I can appreciate people that live on Davis being able to feel as if they live on a private secluded street, the reality is Davis Avenue is a public street. The Davis Avenue portion that is unimproved right now is still public right-of-way. Whether it was my client or anyone to the west of where Melrose stops, the city was going to require that the public infrastructure be improved on the developer's dime. The city, likewise, today could go remove those barricades and improve Davis Avenue because it is a public right-of-way. It is in the public interest to have as much access as possible. So if you think of think if there was like a fire or some other event in the area, having the ability to come at the subject site or the site south of us, that's an industrial tract, from multiple points in case one of them was blocked, it is in the public interest to have the public right-of-way accessible and open for emergency service vehicles. So we would ask that you grant this variance. I believe we meet all of the statutory conditions. Staff has identified no unfavorables. And I would just submit to the board that traffic on Davis, in my mind, is not really an element to consider here because, of course, it's a public right-of-way. The city itself or any other developer, if they so chose, could go and improve that, remove the barricades. And here, the public and the city is getting a benefit in that this developer is going to have to bear the costs of improving that public infrastructure. So I'd be happy to answer any questions and ask for your support.
So with that, you've answered a lot of my questions. And for the folks that appear before the board, quite often they kind of know how I see a lot of these issues, and I see the board as a board of pretty limited powers and limited authority. And so I do think the protest's biggest hurdle is it's not clear to me that Davis Avenue is particularly at issue for the purposes of this board. It seems like that would have been an issue maybe at city council when this thing was approved for this use. But I'll let them make their arguments on that front. I just think I'm going to let them know ahead of time that I think that's going to be their biggest hurdle. For your purposes, though, Mr. Box, on Melrose Lane, you mentioned that the expectation is that it's going to be developed to industrial standards. This, again, is not required, what I'm about to ask you, but is this going to have, it seems like a good case for like sidewalks and a bike lane and that kind of stuff that might be contemplated in an area like this that's next to a park in a neighborhood, and it's going to have a lot of people at the mobile home park. And it also might, in my mind, the reason I raise it is it could minimize the amount of traffic that's being that's going down Davis and going down Melrose if someone can walk or take a bike.
Yeah. So we will obviously have we do agree to the pedestrian connection. The Parks Department had provided a comment in the staff report to connect to that bike and walking path to our west. I don't know. Obviously, we're not seeking a variance as it relates to a sidewalk. So whatever the code requires is certainly what we'll do. I defer to JJ on that piece of it. JJ, do you happen to know if a sidewalk is required?
If sidewalks are not currently there, they wouldn't be required.
Okay.
That was my thought, is I don't know that they'd be required. And if the idea is to build it to industrial standards, not clear to me that a sidewalk would be required under those standards. So.
And you've got a lot of industrial to the south. All of that is industrial. The vacant tract, although vacant, is zoned. I believe it's straight I-2. It's straight I-3. So that you can't find I-3 property in Oklahoma City. I mean, everything, including like a toxic waste dump, is permitted in I-3. So it's really not an area that I would believe the city would want sidewalks. Of course, here, to your point, I get it. You've got that part to the west. And we will obviously provide a pedestrian connection. But along this stretch, I don't believe that those would be planned.
Okay. Board members, questions or comments of Mr. Box before we open it up?
Are you asking for comments from individuals?
No, just board members at this
Oh,
point.
sorry.
That's okay. Thanks. So board members, questions or comments? Okay. Cindy, based on your list of people who have signed up, if you have anyone signed up in support, if you could start with that, with those folks first.
I'm not sure my list contains support or protest. I just know they want to speak.
Okay.
So I have Mark Robertson.
Present.
Okay. Mr. Robinson, if you wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and give some comments, and please try to limit those to about 3 minutes.
Sure, not a problem at all. My name is Mark Robertson. I'm an attorney. My address is 9658 North May Avenue. And I am representing Mr. Dwayne Mosley and some other property owners to the north, in the neighborhood north of the proposed property that's seeking the variance. I have submitted to Ms. Lakin yesterday 43 written objections to the variance from various owners and occupants of the homes in the neighborhood to the north. Mr. Mosley was only able to canvass a portion of the homes due to his time constraints. And those people that he did visit with, many of them had not heard of the variance request being made. The basic objection that they've got is that the proposal is not only to basically repave and have Melrose brought up to industrial standards, but it's also to have secondary access and pave what hasn't been paved of Davis Avenue, which creates not only additional traffic and access of the mobile home park to Davis, which is a secondary road, but also the concern that it's going to increase Davis Avenue as a thoroughfare between 10th Street and Council Road and Melrose. One of the problems that the neighborhood has is that a portion of the Davis really turns into a lake whenever it rains due to inadequate stormwater drainage, and that additional paving and connecting the unpaved portion to a paved Melrose and paving Davis will just likely increase the problems with rainwater there. So I've expressed that to Mr. Box in a conversation yesterday, and I'm just here to indicate the feelings of many of the residents of the residential properties north of this, basically turning Davis Avenue into a thoroughfare. That's all of my comments, and I believe that that Ms. Lakin has copies of the 43 written protests that that Mr. Mosley submitted.
Yeah, so we received those. So I appreciate you gathering those, and I may come back to you after we hear some more folks speak, particularly because you do represent a larger number of people, and if they all wanted to speak, they might be able to and get 3 minutes each. So I may come back to you and since you guys, I think, are being judicious of our time, and ask some questions of you.
Certainly, Chair.
Okay. And before we move on, Mr. Box, before I forget to raise this issue to you, what's your response to the flooding issue, and do you have any potential solutions to that problem?
Well, I frankly, kind of in the same vein as my initial argument, the improvement of Davis will likely improve the flooding, because of course, when we submit our building permits, we're going to have to submit our paving plans to the city's public works department. So we're going to have to meet the drainage ordinance and figure out a way to move that water in a manner that is consistent with the drainage ordinance. Whereas now, because it's unimproved, there is no solution. The water just goes where it goes. Being able to improve it is going to, I think, improve the drainage scenario, because you're going to have the city staff eyes on it and tell us what they want us to do as it relates to drainage.
Okay. And as you're, I'm sure, no doubt aware, it's not entirely clear to me that the flooding issue is necessarily before this board. You know, the Melrose issue, I think, is directly in front of the board. The Davis issue and the flooding issue seems tangential at best, not to say that we can't try to fix it while we're here. Or that maybe some, you know, I think maybe their argument is the development of Melrose is going to worsen that flooding issue. And so therefore it is before this board. But it's not crystal clear to me that it's necessarily an issue that's before the board. At best, it would be something that we could hopefully just clean up and address all in one application.
In fact, Mr. Chair, to that point, Cindy, could you put on the lot layout of the mobile home park? This may help to answer your question, Mr. Chair. It'll be nice when we're back in person and I can just point to an exhibit instead of relying on. There we go. Okay, so if you look in the southwest corner of the development, you'll see just a big white area. That is a detention pond. That pond is approximately 67,000 square feet, so it's almost an acre and a half. So that's where it's anticipated. Of course, Public Works is going to have to tell us, do they agree, disagree, should it be bigger? They're going to tell us what has to happen. When this gets improved, you know, water is going to be put to that low. So this perhaps answers the question that you were raising.
Okay. Board members, any other questions or comments on this issue before we move on to other speakers?
Melrose being built to industrial standards, it'll be curbed, right? Maybe.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so that'll help too, running down the road.
That's right.
Okay. Cindy, if you wanted to recognize the next person on your list.
Robin Jones.
Yes, Robin Jones. I'm with West 10 District and live at 1508 North Markwell Place, but that's not related to this conversation. One thing I just want to clarify, you keep referencing the park that is west of this proposed mobile home park. It's not really a park, it's a path, and it's primarily bike. It's very, very little pedestrians. It's part of the whole bike path of the city. So a park, it may be park grounds, but it isn't a park. And then I want to just clarify then, so is the main entrance of the Melrose, of the mobile home park then going to be onto Melrose or onto Davis? That was part of the conversation last time, and maybe you said it and I missed it.
No, I understand. My understanding is it's going to be on Melrose, and Davis is going to be secondary only. But without having a back and forth between the applicant and you taking up your time, I'll let him confirm, but that was my understanding. It's going to be on Melrose.
Okay. Well, those were my main things relative for the area in general, as along with Mark, the attorney that spoke earlier.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I had Mr. Collins, if he still wanted to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Matthew Collins, 14425 Chapel Drive, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. I'm attorney for the property owner immediately to the south of the applicant's property. Initially, our concerns were twofold, both the construction of Melrose Avenue and the Davis matter. The Melrose Avenue construction issue has been addressed to our satisfaction. The applicant has agreed, obviously as condition of receiving their request, that they'll construct Melrose consistent with industrial standards to the west of any access or driveway off of Melrose to the mobile home park. So to that extent, my client is in agreement. The other concern is obviously Davis, and from the south, it's also a concern because there's significant industrial traffic from the south. If you spend any time in this area, you know that dump trucks and 18-wheelers are consistently in and out of this area that is very heavy industrial that Mr. Box has already acknowledged. That presents public safety issues as well to those folks that may be coming in this area north of Davis that wouldn't otherwise be coming here and have historically for 50 years since the mid 70s been going to 10th Street. My client sees this as a real concern for the future. As the pictures that we presented, particularly picture 6, shows the fence, and pictures 8, 9, and 10 show the very permanent barricades that have been put up at this location. I spoke to the former owners of this industrial area and the applicant's area and the piece just to the east, the Roberts brothers, and they've owned that property prior to my client's ownership for a very long time. I asked them, I said, what's your understanding of this? How Davis was essentially closed. And he told me that this issue came before the city when Westwood was initially being developed. This entire area was being developed, and that it was important at that time to the city that Davis not access Melrose, and that it was a particular concern that residential and industrial traffic should not mix. Now, our position is not that they're not entitled to the zoning that they have. I mean, that's already there. And honestly, the 162 lots, that's going to add traffic, but you add the additional traffic from the residential from the north, which is not just the existing residential traffic, but it's also a new apartment complex that's being developed on the north side. And you created potentially a very serious combination. I also quickly had talks with city staff, in particular, one with the fire department and an emergency access gate. I was told could be a very serious, it could be considered at this point to both accommodate the fire safety issue, but also address virtually every protesting party's position in this matter. So our position is yes, allow access Melrose to council subject to the improvement, but also subject to realization of the public safety realities on both sides of those barricaded areas, and make certain that fire safety can get through from the north to the south and vice versa, but not create a situation that from the mid 70s has been preserved and accounted for. I'd be happy to address any questions. I do want to address one other issue because I thought the chairman brought up a great point. I mean, what perspective of the statute does Davis play in this? Well, I don't think you can look at Melrose Lane in a vacuum. Melrose Lane has specific effect on Davis and on the traffic in this area, I think it would be far too convenient to just look at Melrose. If your position is that you just want to get an approval, then that would be easy not to open it up and look at the grand scheme of things. But the statute, to answer the question, the third provision, relief if granted would not cause substantial detriment to the public good or impair the purposes and intent of the ordinance or comprehensive plan. Would not cause substantial detriment to the public good. Everything you're hearing from the protesters is regarding the public good, and it's clearly within the confines of this board's scope of what to review. So we take great issue with the fact that our conversation here is futile when it comes to that matter. We would point out the staff report, which includes the applicants addressing item 3. And in their addressing of item 3, they specifically call out Davis Avenue and that it will provide access between R4, R2, R1 neighborhoods. But what they leave out is the industrial portion of that. And even the applicant, based on that paragraph 3, sees Davis as an issue regarding detriment to the public good or impair. Obviously, they think the opposite and they're entitled to their opinion. We believe that a good compromise position would be an emergency access gate. We would seriously request that if an approval is granted in this, that it be contingent to the applicant's installation of emergency access gate at the point where Davis goes into the Westwood area. We certainly appreciate your time and the willingness this board has to listen to all parties involved.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'm looking at a map here, and you represent, your clients are to the south of the proposed development.
That's correct. The approximately 30 acres of I-3 heavy industrial property to the south.
Okay. And can you just help me understand how improving Melrose is potentially a detriment to them?
No, I can't do that because I agree with you. The Melrose improvement is absolutely beneficial. That's why I said our position was twofold.
Yeah, I understand. I don't understand how these industrial, I guess, entities down here are impacted by Davis in any.
They're not currently, and I don't know if they've been able to present those pictures, but they're not currently because there is no traffic coming from the north of heavy residential traffic. But that concrete batch plant area is 2 different entities, and there's a constant circling of dump trucks and 18-wheelers, and I'm probably not vocalizing that well enough, but there is heavy industrial traffic there, and that's our concern that we think could be alleviated by an emergency access gate, and that we don't see any drawback to that position, frankly.
Okay, I understand. Let's see, I thought I had another question for you, but I think the emergency access gate part fixed it. I know one potential issue, I mean, it seemed like one of the major protests in this case was folks just don't want a mobile home park there. And again, it seemed like a city council issue, not really a board of adjustment issue. I can appreciate those concerns and folks that live in these areas having those concerns, but the city specifically zoned this for this use. And the applicant's going to say they did that by picking certain areas throughout the city where this was a permitted use, not necessarily recognizing that in some areas that might cause an issue, like this area where Melrose cannot be developed into a minor arterial, and therefore it could never see its proposed use being fulfilled. So how do you answer that question?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, but it's probably not what you would expect. The property there at SPUD 1208 is owned by the same entity that owns this parcel. I feel that very well could be the answer, and I believe the C3 used to be owned by that same entity. So at the time that this was given zoning, they had the opportunity to bring access all the way out to North Council Road. So that this would have never been an issue if there was private access to Council Road.
Okay. Board members, any questions or comments of Mr. Collins before we move on? Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
And Cindy, if you had anyone else signed up?
I did not.
Okay. Mr. Box, if you wanted to address any of the comments that you heard.
And can I just indicate that there is nothing in our protest that indicates we are protesting putting in a mobile home park. That is not what we are protesting. So I just want to make that crystal clear.
Okay. Now, there was a comment from one of the protests that said that they don't really think that it should have been zoned for mobile home use in the first place. And so that's what I was commenting on. But I don't think that was you, Mr. Robertson. So thank you for the clarification.
Sure, Mr. Chair. I'll start one of the questions by, I believe it was Ms. Jones. I will confirm that Melrose is the primary access point. Davis will be the secondary access point. Staff has a condition that we agree with, that all mobile homes coming to and leaving the site must be done through the Melrose Avenue access point. So we do agree with that. And yeah, Melrose will be the primary access point. So in terms of the Roberts brothers saying that the city's plans were always to not have Davis connect to Melrose, I find that to be far-fetched at best. Of course, it is Oklahoma City right-of-way. They could have at any time, if that was so their plan, sought to close the right-of-way to ensure that there wouldn't be the connection between Davis and Melrose. Of course, they didn't. So that tells me that the city's perspective is that it's a public right-of-way that should be connected. Mr. Collins' arguments are arguments more akin to a zoning fight. The conflict of uses is simply not at issue here. Conflicting uses and compatibility are what Mr. Privet hears every other Thursday as a planning commission member in legislative decisions, not quasi-judicial decisions on whether or not the elements of a variance have been met. This is a very unique circumstance because of Melrose. If that trail system and parkland to the west wasn't there and Melrose continued on, we wouldn't be here. This is simply limited to Melrose not being classified by the city as a minor arterial. We believe that lack of classification is more than made up for by the fact that on my client's dime, we will be improving this to industrial standards. So if you think about it, if this was just a minor arterial, but that it was crumbling, we wouldn't be here. We could just go put that mobile home park and we'd have to call the city and say, we need you to fix your road. Instead, the city, the public, certainly Mr. Collins' clients are getting a free industrial street. I think that is nothing but a benefit. So we believe we meet the statutory elements and would ask for your approval.
Mr. Box, one question. It sounds like a bit of a ridiculous question, but I promise there's a point to it. What could possibly be done to turn Melrose into a minor arterial?
Yeah.
Would it be going over the bike lane and over the river that's there, I guess? Or what specifically would need to be done?
Well, the city would have to declare they no longer wish to have the walking trail, bike trail, declare that land surplus, some developer come and buy it, and then public right-of-way be dedicated that would somehow include some sort of bridge that would go over the river. And then, well, you'd have to build a bridge over the river and then extend that right-of-way over a mile to Morgan Road.
Okay, that's what I had in mind.
Yeah. Oh, and I do, Mr. Chair, if I could address the question about the crash gate. Crash gates are only permitted in private street developments. This will be public streets. And so of course you cannot block public streets. So a crash gate won't work here because these will all be public streets.
Could you get around that requirement somehow?
I don't think so, but for flow, we don't think it makes much sense to force all the residential traffic to Melrose. I mean, for flow of the park, having an access on Davis and an access on Melrose, we believe to be best practice.
Okay. And there was some talk about whether the fire code or fire restrictions would require you to have access through Davis. Do you know if that's accurate, or if you speak on that?
Yeah. So when we first set out to look at this, we sat down with staff, and staff was the one that required us to have the secondary point. Having 2 points on Melrose, we think from a public safety standpoint becomes problematic, because if you consider, let's say, just west of the far eastern point of our track, Melrose became blocked. Well, if both your access points are on the same street and access to that street is blocked, you're kind of in a bad spot. Whereas if you have one access on Davis and one access on Melrose, if one of those is blocked, you still have a means of ingress and egress to get into the subject property. So for flow of not only our residents, but also emergency services, having them on separate streets, we believe to be a positive.
Okay, but it's not necessarily a requirement that you're aware of?
Specifically on Davis, or specifically 2 access points?
Either one.
2 access points is a requirement. I'm not sure if my recollection was staff is the one that pushed us to Davis in our initial meetings.
Okay. And I thought Mr. Wilson might be able to join us. So Mr. Wilson, if you wanted to speak on this issue.
Yeah, this is Mike Wilson with the Fire Marshal's Office. Yes, they would need 2 access points. It could be, like I had mentioned to Mr. Collins, that it could be an emergency gate if it were on, the Davis Street side, and then have open access. But we would need 2 ways in just for fire access. And the other issue on Melrose, for it to be an arterial, would be that it would either, it could have to extend west, which would obviously be a bigger issue, or turn and go north or south to one of the other streets. But yeah, it would have to be improved to minor arterial standards to do all that.
Okay, thank you. Board members, any questions or comments of Mr. Wilson? Okay. City staff, did you have any clarifications that we need to have in the record before we start kind of deliberating? Okay. And Mr. Box, it sounds like you could do a crash gate as some of the residents are requesting, or at least I think Mr. Collins was requesting. I don't know about the residents, but it sounds like that could be done, but you're just saying due to the flow of traffic, it wouldn't be optimal.
I've never seen the city allow a crash gate on a public street. JJ, can you correct me?
No, that's correct. The right of way would have to be closed and vacated. Or
Okay.
you could put a crash gate across your drive.
Yeah, this is Mike Wilson with Fire Marshal's Office. That would be the other way, is that they fence their property from access onto Davis, not fencing Davis itself off. But like you say, forcing all the traffic onto the industrial street that has more industrial issues might not be a good idea either.
Okay.
But isn't what you're saying that they could put a gate on their own property as it goes into Davis?
JJ, the streets within this development are public streets. I've never seen someone be able to put a gate on a public street.
Yes, it
That's
wouldn't
correct.
be on the public. Yes, but as you were saying, Mr. Robertson, it would be on their private property, on their driveway, not on the street.
The streets within this development are public streets. They will be dedicated.
Yeah, if they're public, they can't be gated.
They can't, they're gating, absolute, not a possibility.
Okay, no, I understand. I understand. And if the board members have any questions of anyone in particular, then we'll do that. But I think we've heard everyone's points on all sides. Board members, questions or comments of the applicant or any of the protests? Okay. I'll kind of get my views out there. I think some of these issues, some of the, I'll call them tangential. They're tangential issues that might be cleaner or preferred if we would address those issues, but they're not necessarily conditions that need to be met in order for a variance to be granted. I think the only thing we really need to consider is the Melrose issue. Obviously, we can consider things holistically, but taking a narrow view of what's before the board, I think that's the Melrose Lane issue. And I think I accept the argument that Melrose could just as easily been a minor arterial, and it's going to be built to specs that are above minor arterial. And to me, this looks like a case where City Council said that a mobile home should be able to go into this area and didn't necessarily contemplate every code provision that would result from that designation. And one of those things that resulted from that was Melrose Lane didn't technically fit. And so someone would need to do something about that if they were going to have a mobile home park as a purported use for this property. Sort of fits perfectly within a case that comes before the Board of Adjustment, in my view. I don't say that too often, and I'm not saying that this is an easy case, but this to me seems like a case where the Board of Adjustment action is appropriate in the narrow context of considering Melrose Lane and determining that if, as long as they build it up to minor arterial or better, and they proposed industrial, which I'll accept as a condition of the application being granted, in addition to the other conditions that staff have said and the applicant has said that they will abide by, I can support the application. But I'm only one vote, and I've been outvoted before. So, board members, any questions or comments?
I just wanted to make a comment to address Mr. Collins and Mr. Robertson's concerns. I appreciate the arguments that you both have made on behalf of your clients and the interested parties. In my view, I think that we as the Board of Adjustment are viewing this application in its totality. And that includes not only what they're doing on Melrose, but what they're doing with Davis as well. So I can appreciate, what I believe it was Mr. Robertson, maybe it was Mr. Collins, that said, the concerns go directly to the third statutory condition that we're looking at. Is this going to cause a substantial detriment to public good? And in your view, it does. And so I just want you to know that I've considered that. That was one of the things, as I was reading through the protest letters and hearing your argument today, it is something that I'm considering and maybe not taking as narrow of a view of this application. But all of that being said, and considering all of that, I'll just put this out there that I am leaning towards granting the variance because I do believe that it meets the conditions, even after considering the arguments. But I just wanted to voice that I do think that it is part of the application as a whole, what the applicant is doing with Davis as well as Melrose, because of that third statutory condition. So I just wanted to address that to both of the attorneys that spoke today.
Yeah, no, I completely understand that, and am sympathetic to that point of view. To me, it just goes back to I hate to play hypotheticals, but if Melrose were a minor arterial, none of that other stuff matters. The applicant is about to develop Melrose into better than minor arterial, and therefore, from my perspective, for the board's narrow authority, I tend toward granting the application. Any other comments, board members, or a motion?
I would move approval of application 14843 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for the variance requested. And as part of my motion, I would include that it be conditioned on the road being developed to industrial standard, as well as the other voluntary conditions that the applicant has agreed to.
I'll second.
Okay. And Mr. Barr, just to be crystal clear, you mean the voluntary conditions that are in the staff report?
Yes, I believe the applicant has agreed to do a couple of things as far as the walkway and, excuse me, let me find that. Yes, the two that are in section 4.
Okay. Got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14843 for the reason that it meets statutory conditions or a variance subject to the conditions stated in the motion as presented in the staff report. Once you are able to, cast your votes.
Thank you.
And it's approved. Thank you.
Item 4 is case 14844. It's a request of Brad Jeffries for a variance to setback regulations in the RA district located at 9409 Megan's Way.
Okay. Is the applicant on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present a summary of your application?
Yes, my name is Brad Jeffress. I'm at 9409 Megan's Way, McLeod, Oklahoma. And I'm asking for a variance to allow an outbuilding within 10 feet of the south property line. I've considered several options of placement of this building, and what I have is a gentle slope off to the back. The other picture, you can actually see a portion, not the other one, off to the right hand side toward the back. You can see the slope, and you can also see a small channel where my neighbor's drainage comes over into my property and continues over all the way to the southwest corner of my property. I had considered putting the building further back, but it would alter the drainage off of her property and my property. It would also involve bringing in a large amount of dirt and extra fill to bring the building up to a level footing. So I'm asking for the variance at 10 feet. The storage building is going to be primarily used for storage of a travel trailer and personal equipment such as lawnmowers and so forth that we have on the property right now. I tried to alleviate violating any of these ordinances. As you can see from the drawing that I presented, if I were to go over 15 more feet, it would put it right behind my house, and it would make it almost impossible for me to back the fifth wheel into that building. Where I have it placed in the drawing, I should be able to drive right or back right up that driveway, and with a minor jog, be able to place my fifth wheel in there.
Looking at your rendering there, I mean, is there a way you can push that over another 5 feet? I mean, I realize there'd be a bit of an angle there, but.
Well, I laid it out with stakes and I measured quite a bit, different scenarios, and the 10 feet gives me the least amount of jockeying to get, a 35, 40-foot trailer. Well, it'd be closer to, it'd have to be a 35-foot trailer. Excuse me. In there, if I have to go another 5 feet in or so, I'll end up doing whatever the board finds it is necessary. I've talked to my neighbors, none of them have spoke about any objections to me doing this. In fact, we've got a house to the south was vacant, And some neighbors just moved into there and they wrote me a letter saying that, no, we have no issue. The house isn't even shown on this picture. It's just been completed and people have moved into it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that was just my thought, is it's a pretty substantial variance request compared to what we normally would consider or grant. And so to the extent that you could minimize it, I think that would help your prospects.
Well, I was told that part of this 25-foot setback was due to the fact that we didn't have fire hydrants out here, so we don't have city water. And what we're talking about is 100% steel building, and then it will have fire-resistant spray foam insulation on the inside of it too. Now, if it was a stick building, I could, understand there should be a lot more concern. But we're talking about a building that, 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit before it even starts melting.
Yeah, but this variance would carry with the land. So someone could, you could not build that building and then build something else. I guess we could condition it on it being this exact building, but we don't normally do that. So it would carry with the land, so anyone could put anything there in the future. So that's why we're a little bit more careful when granting these whenever we consider them. But that not necessarily that it's fatal to your application or anything. It's just a thought that I pointed out. But board members, any questions or comments of the applicant?
Mine, same as yours, that it's a little bit of a substantial variance that I'm comfortable granting, but if we move in a little bit, that help me.
Well,
another 5 feet would make me much more comfortable personally, but
if I'd had fire hydrants out here, I wouldn't even have needed the variance according to the code. I could have gone to 10 foot. And it's all based upon whether I have city water out here or not, and so I'm putting up a steel building, which is fire resistant just due to the material.
Yeah, no, I understand, but we're given codes and code requirements by the city council, and bound to follow them unless we find the statutory conditions. One of which being the relief is the minimum necessary to alleviate the hardship. So you got to show a hardship, and then it's the medium necessary. And to me, I think you could kick it in another 5 feet, and that would be probably closer to the minimum necessary.
I can put more concrete down and put a bigger pad back there for maneuvering the vehicle around, I suppose.
Okay. Board members, questions or comments? Okay. I don't think I had anyone else signed up to speak on this, but is there anyone on the line that wanted to speak on this application? Okay. So given the commentary, it sounds like at least 2 of the board members would be looking at, I think that would be a 10-foot variance. So you could encroach up to 10 feet. So 15-foot variance, I guess, instead of a 10-foot. Board members, questions, comments, or a motion?
I can move to approve the application on the condition that it's a 15-foot total side setback variance.
And I'll second, Mike.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14844, modified to a 15-foot side yard setback variance for the reason that that variance meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Item 5 is case 14-845. It's a request of Terry Lane for a variance to the accessory building regulations located at 6901 Southeast 160th Street.
Okay, is the applicant on the line?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you wanted to present your application?
Yeah, I am filing for a variance in the placement of the metal building due to the fact that my yard backs up to the pond and I've got a pretty significant slope. So I would like to build it not behind the rear wall, but quite a bit behind the front wall of my house. And the HOA was on board with me, and all the neighbors I've talked to are good with it, and that's why I'm here.
Look like, is it correct that you need 2 variances?
I don't believe so. I had it at 14 foot from the property line, but I took it to 15.
Okay.
Because that was one of the comments.
I see rear wall, and then should be the same color as the primary residence. Is that just 2 variances, or is that because it's not, it doesn't meet the rear wall requirement?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
I was asking JJ, but
oh, okay.
Just to confirm, just to make sure that whatever we grant is actually going to help you. But
I'm sorry, you were breaking up. What's your question?
Was this 2 variances, or is this just 1 variance? I see the rear wall, and then also same color as the primary residence. Are those working in tandem, or are those 2 variances?
No, I think it's just the 1 variance.
Okay. Okay. This one seemed to make sense to me. I didn't see another place you could stick this thing, given the unique piece of land you've got there. But board members, any questions or comments of the applicant?
I think what you were saying was a requirement for the PUD and that development.
So he's not varying that, I guess?
Yeah, I don't think we have any say over that anyways.
Okay. I think we can vary those, but I guess he's not seeking one. So it's just the rear wall. So yeah, based on where the house is, I can kind of see where this is unique, but okay. Board members, well, I don't have anyone signed up to speak, but is there anyone on the line that wanted to speak on this application? Okay, hearing none. Questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll move approval.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14845 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Item 6, 14846. It's a request of Robert Smith for a variance to the setback regulations located at 12601 Southwest 25th Street.
Okay, is the applicant on the line?
Yes.
Okay. If you wanted to introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Sure. Robert Smith, 12601 Southwest 25th. As you can see, our lot, it's just a tiny bit over an acre, pie shaped. And on the side of the house that has the driveway, I would like to extend the driveway into the building but because of the position of the house, put the building in the size that I need to what I'm going to be using it for, it needs to be 24 feet, at least 24 feet wide. But to move it any further away from the fence, it's going to push the building back behind the house, and it would block the view out of the back of the house. That's our master bedrooms on that side with a double window, and would like to avoid that if at all possible, which is the reason why for the request to build the building within 5 feet of the fence line. There's been a previous variance requested in my neighborhood, and a 6-foot variance side setback was granted variance just a few years ago. So it's not like there hasn't been a precedent. My neighbor on the side that's this is closest to, he has no problem with this request, and it's not like his house is just not right there next to the property line either, and it's not facing that property line, and just to accommodate my request would really help out with the reasons why I need the building, mainly for storage.
Yeah, this one to me seemed kind of similar to a couple applications ago where it seems like, Sandy, could you go back to that rendering? Yeah, it seemed like it could be pushed over a little bit and not at least minimize the variance. I mean, 20 of 25 feet is a very large variance. Getting to the territory, I mean, I know you have a very peculiar piece of property there, taking that into account, but it's becoming a very large variance here, to the point that we start asking questions about the hardship and whether or not having a storage shed is a hardship. So if it's possible to move that over a little bit, I think that would help me get more comfortable, and at the same time the rest of the board might be perfectly comfortable as it is. So,
well, may I say that where the building is, where it's planned to be right now, it does not block the sight line from the back of the house from when you're in the bedroom looking out, and to push it any further at all would begin to block that view out the back, which again, we would really like to avoid that. It's a nice view. So, and I'm thinking, there was a previous request that was granted for a similar side setback. So I plead with the board if you could see it my way to grant this.
I'll say kind of the normal spiel that each application stands on its own, and so not necessarily precedential. Like, it might be in a court where we look at that stuff, although it can definitely influence our decision making. It's not binding on the court or on the board, and each application stands on its own. Board members, do you have any questions or comments or any thoughts on this application?
Do we know what the 5-foot easement is that's recorded?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Do we know the easement that's shown in one of your exhibits? It's saying that there's no utility in there. I was just wondering whose easement that is. OG&E.
I really have no idea. There are no utilities in that easement.
Yeah, given how unique this property is, I mean, I I can get on board with some kind of a variance. I don't know how the rest of the board feels with this as rendered. They might be perfectly comfortable with this as rendered. I don't know. So board members, you have a position on this application?
I'll just comment. I'm kind of having trouble seeing the hardship for this building. I don't know if there's a way to reduce the size, perhaps. I think in some other cases it needs to be a certain size to accommodate a RV or something like that. And this is storage. Is that a possibility to reduce the size of the building itself?
Well, sure, I could, but I would have to reduce the square footage. And, I've already kind of plotted it out, the storage building for, I've got a little fishing boat and a lawnmower and a utility trailer, and I need some storage area. So I really can't make it any longer to make up for the a less wide unit. So to answer your question, I really need the 24 feet width in order to accommodate my needs.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Try to pull up the aerial again on my screen, but there it is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I could, reluctantly support the application, just given how strange this shape is and your limited ability to use that backyard. I could reluctantly support it. I don't know where the rest of the board is, but board members, I can't make a motion. So questions, comments, or a motion?
I'll make a motion to deny application 14846 for the reasons that it does not meet the statutory requirements for a variance.
I'll second to see where we are.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to deny. Well, before that, do we want to give the applicant an opportunity to revise the application so that his fee is not wasted?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought, you'd thrown out the opportunity to potentially move it in a little. I was talking about reducing the size, and if he's willing to do those, then yeah, I'd love to hear from him.
Okay. Yeah, I would just propose before we take a vote on that, I don't know that it would be approved anyway.
I can look when I get out. Did you review them already?
Can we mute who's ever city staff? Can we mute whoever that is? I would say I don't think that the motion to deny would probably pass anyway, but just so we don't go through the whole rigmarole and then ask him to revise anyway, do we want to just ask him to see if he can revise the application and come back to us either later in this meeting or at the next meeting with a revised application? And then I will also ask Rita, now that we've got a motion in a second, do we need to vote for it, or can we reopen the discussion?
Well, this is Robert Smith, and I'm definitely, if you're going to deny it, then I'm going to have to make the building less wide, just narrower, and but I'll still won't be able to meet I think it's a 25-foot side setback. There's no way I can do it without asking for another variance, or so if we can continue this and save me another $1,200, I'd appreciate that.
No, and I'd also, go ahead, I think Miss Talley.
Oh,
Board Member Ibarra could withdraw her motion,
Okay.
and the person who seconded, Board Member Privet, could withdraw his second. You'd be back to where you were before any action was taken. And if you chose then to continue the item, you could do that.
Okay. I thought that might be an option. Although we can go through with the vote. Ms. Ybarra, it was your motion. So,
No, I'm happy to withdraw.
okay. And then Mr. Privet?
Same.
Okay. We'll reopen the deliberation now and the discussion. And Mr. Smith has said that he thinks he might be able to make some revisions. Mr. Smith, I do want to say, I don't think any of the board members have said that they're not willing to agree with some sort of variance. So don't take from this that you need to meet the 25-foot setback or the application is going to be denied, because I don't think that's the temperature of the board. I think we're just wanting to minimize it as much as possible. And then once we get comfortable with the fact that there's not anything else you could do, and you meet the statutory conditions, then I think we'll be able to take a meaningful vote and go from there. Does that make sense?
Sure. Okay. And I don't know if it's the appropriate time, but for me to bring this up, but I mean, how narrow does that building need to be? Or in other words, how close can I get to that fence, or how much can I encroach into that 25-foot side setback before, it is not acceptable?
Yeah, I understand. And we can't really tell you how to get your application approved through the board and kind of what it would take. But what I can say is just try to minimize the extent of the variance as much as you possibly can in your next revisions. And that'll give you the highest probability of getting it approved. And I'll tell you from my position, you're not far off now, because I don't know how much further you could go back, but I do think there are some things you could do to minimize that variance for me personally. And then, the rest of the board can have their own view on it. But just being in a lot of these meetings, my take is the board's not against your application. It's just as a whole, but they think that you can minimize the variance a little bit more than you have. So with that, board members, do we have a motion to continue this item? But before we get to that, Mr. Smith, is just 2 weeks enough?
Oh, yeah, 2 weeks.
20th.
That'd be fine.
Okay. Cindy, that assumes we have a meeting in 2 weeks. Do we have a meeting in 2 weeks?
May 20th.
Yes,
Okay.
May 20th.
Okay. So board members, it looks like we're at the stage of moving for a continuance to the May 20th meeting, if the board's on board with that.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to continue the application of case number 14846 to the May 20th meeting. Cast your votes, please. And it's continued.
Hey Sheila, I'm still in the meeting, but they're winding down.
JJ, next application.
Item 7 is case 14848. It's a request of Grubbs Consulting on behalf of Mayfair HPR LLC for a variance to permit parking and maneuvering, lighting, and signs within the street right-of-way on May Avenue between Northwest 47th and Northwest 50th Street.
Good afternoon. To much disappointment, I'm David Box, not Mark Grubbs, 522 Colcord Drive. This is an application that is a bit odd in that the parking and these improvements that we seek to get a variance on have all been in place since sometime in the 1950s. This area of Oklahoma City was developed in the 50s, Mayfair Shopping Center specifically. All of these improvements have been there since then in the same layout that we are seeking a variance for today. I'm not sure how what the code looked like in the early 50s. Presumably this was permitted at the time it was developed. The reason for the request is a new owner has acquired the property, and part of the due diligence efforts, this was revealed that these parking spaces were actually within the right of way. So the parking spaces that we have are the number that we have are right on the number for what we need for code. In addition, most of the leases that are in place with all of the existing tenants have a certain number of parking requirements that they all have. And so the hardship, if the variance was not granted, we would be out of code for the number of parking spaces, and we'd have significant violations of our leases that would lead to tenants being able to walk on the contract. So it's problematic from that standpoint. I would suggest that it's peculiar because, like I said, these parking spaces in this configuration have been in existence since the 1950s. Minimum necessary because, of course, all of the code requirements are met, and the relief if granted would not cause a detriment to the public good or impair the purposes of the comp plan or ordinance. I would submit that having adequate parking and meeting the code here specifically because of the tenant requirements that we have would meet that element. There is a comment about sidewalks. It's worth noting, Cindy, I don't know if you can go to the aerial. In the last several years, I'm gonna say last decade, there was a public improvement project for sidewalks that came up May Avenue from the south. And the sidewalk is actually on the east side of May until it hits 47th Street. At 47th Street, based upon the existence of the parking that exists within the Mayfair Shopping Center on the east side of May, the sidewalk actually jumps across May Avenue to the west and continues at May Avenue on the west side of that street. It is unlikely that there will be another bond project that would come through that would put sidewalks here. When the city was doing all of those sidewalks, they were picking sides of the street and putting them on one side or the other. There is a comment, there's no unfavorables, but then there's a comment that if the variance is approved, it shouldn't restrict installation of sidewalks for part of a street improvement project. We could agree to that if there was some sort of municipal bond project that came through that was going to install sidewalks, we would not stand in the way of that. But I think it's very, very remote that would happen based upon the last project that came through, specifically avoided the parking lot on the east side of May. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and would ask for your approval.
So, Mr. Fox, I don't know if you submitted any narrative with the application, but I did not see any narrative that I normally see with these applications. And we've got the highlighted site plan and all of that, but I have zero context for what exactly is going on here, frankly.
Yeah, so there was a narrative of mine. I did not submit the application. A civil engineer did. That was my first question, was where is your narrative and your explanation of the statutory conditions? And Mr. Grubbs did provide me with, let me find it real quick, a narrative that he did submit. JJ, do you?
I don't have a packet in front of me.
And Mr. Privet, what were you saying? I think you cut out for a second.
Same thing that you did. I've been looking at this like a deer in the headlights, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I kind of don't even feel bad about pleading my ignorance here. I have no idea what is going on here. So, I mean, I actually was not hoping that it would all come out in the hearing because I don't like new information coming out in the hearing. But I don't know what's existing. I don't know what's new. I don't know what's proposed really. I mean, the parking, I think, has I can sort of deduce from the application of the exhibits, but there's design standards and I think sign regulations and like all these different requests that I have no idea what is going on here.
Sure. So it is all existing. We're not seeking anything new. It's all existing improvements that we're seeking to get the variance for.
So it's all non-conforming, David?
I'm sorry?
It's all non-conforming currently, is that what you're saying?
So that's what we are told. Like I said, there was a change of ownership, and part of the due diligence is what revealed this. It's all been there since the the early 50s. But as part of the, financing, we needed to go seek the variance.
I thought that might be the case, but then the application contemplates some kind of new development that's not described and new improvements that are not described. And so, I mean, if it's just getting this up to current code and dealing with non-conforming issues, I think, there's that's one issue. But if there's something new, or these are variances to some of these things going forward so that they're potentially not limited and the requirements won't apply going forward, that's a totally different discussion.
Well, perhaps if the chair would,
I'm sorry. David, can I read the few sentences that they wrote when they put on their statutory standard?
Yeah, so I think they didn't make their way to the staff report, but.
Well, this says the shopping center and accessory parking areas within the entire Mayfield Village property have existed in their current condition since the 50s. And the properties have been in their configuration for over 60 years without detriment to the public. But they didn't have any specifics of what they were wanting to vary.
Okay. Well, perhaps if the chair would be so inclined, I just got involved in this. Perhaps we take 2 weeks. I sit down with the client and the civil, and we will submit a proper explanation of the statutory conditions.
I think that'd be wise. Just for your purposes, and I know you already know all of this stuff, but for me personally, knowing what's old and what's new or proposed would be helpful. If it's and really, if it's old or new, just because something's been there for 50 years, maybe we've learned something about city planning about why that shouldn't be the case anymore. And so maybe we want to bring some of these things up to code. So, why that wouldn't need to happen in this case would be helpful. And then exactly what the variance is. So if it's a particular number of signs, if it's 10 old signs and 4 new ones, whatever it is. And I know there were some issues with the sidewalk. I'm very familiar with that area, and that sidewalk is not particularly good. So anyway, so maybe you can address that in the application as well. But I know it's not too helpful, but I think you know enough about how this board operates to come with the comprehensive application.
Yep, I'll get with my engineer and client. We'll get it sorted out.
Okay, and you think 2 weeks is sufficient?
Yeah, I think I can get everything done and back to staff by next week to be out in your packets for the next time.
Okay, perfect. Board members, it sounds like May 20th. A continuance to May 20th would be the motion if the board is so inclined.
Yeah, I'll move to continue to May 20.
Second.
No, second.
We've got a motion and a second to continue case number 14848 to the May 20th meeting. Cast your votes, please. And the item's continued.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 8 is 14850, request of GE Johnson Construction for a variance regarding a temporary construction yard located at 820 Northeast 7th Street.
Is the applicant on the line?
Yes,
Okay. I see your hand raised. So if you'd like to introduce yourself by name and address. I just muted someone who had a very bad echo, but I see Ryan Legg through Zoom. So Mr. Legg, were you the representative or not?
I'm with G Johnson, but Eric is the representative that submitted the application. He should be online too.
Okay, so were you not presenting at this point?
No.
Okay, so I'll mute you and unmute whoever was on the cell phone that was unmuted. Okay.
Yes, sir. This is Eric Brown.
Okay, I just had a bad echo, and I think it's because both of you were unmuted at the same time, but I'm not hearing the echo anymore. So you just want to introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Yes, sir. My name's Eric Brown with GE Johnson Construction Company here in Oklahoma City, and the address is 820 Northeast 7th Street. So what we are requesting is a variance to place our construction trailer in the lot that is highlighted there on the south in lots 10, 11, and 12. Those are currently owned by the Urban Renewal Authority, and so we have leased those from them. And you can see up to the northwest, the location of the project site. We are building Hope Lodge building for the American Cancer Society. It is a very tight project site for the where the building sits. And so we really are unable to place our construction trailer on the lot for the building, which is why we have leased the spots down below from Urban Renewal Authority. And so what we are looking at doing for the duration of the project, which should be through April of 2022, is placing our construction trailer, which is 14 foot by 70 foot on that lot, running parallel to 7th Street. Yes, as you can see right there.
Okay, I think the obvious question that you might have anticipated is how long are you seeking this variance for? Presumably not into perpetuity.
That is correct. We are looking. It will be through April of 2022.
Okay. And Mr. Legg, did you have anything to add? Okay.
No. Ryan is our superintendent on the project with GE Johnson, so he will be out on site. So, yes, sir. That's our request.
Okay.
Is a year enough, or we need a year and a half? You know, just extra time just in case.
A year and a half would be great. I mean, that would be ideal if that was possible, just due to any conditions that may delay the project. I mean, the construction of the project has begun on the site, but just in case any delays come about, that gives us a little extra time.
Very gratuitous of Mr. Privet, but I think appropriate.
I appreciate that. As a contractor, I like to think that all projects are on time, everything goes smoothly, but
they're not.
Well, we won't take it. If the board approves it, we won't let them use that as an admission that you're not going to be on time.
I appreciate that.
Board members, any questions or comments of the applicant?
I think it's pretty cut and dry. I'm good.
Did anybody protest?
I do not see any protests, but I'm going to open up the discussion. So if there's anyone on the line that wanted to speak on this application, if you could use the raise your hand function. I don't have anyone signed up, and I don't have any hands raised. So I think we're ready for a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve.
Go ahead.
For a period of a year and a half.
I'll second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the variance request in case number 14850 for a period of 1.5 years for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a variance. Cast your votes, please. And it's approved. All right. Thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Item 9 is case 14847. It's a request for a special exception of Mara Properties to allow lodging accommodations, home sharing at 533 Northwest 30th Street.
Okay, is the applicant on the line?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Morrow, if you wanted to present introduce yourself by name and address and present your application.
Okay, this is Steve Mayer. My address is 3608 Bear Drive in Edmond. And the property is just on the north side of the Paseo area on Northwest 30th Street. And my wife and I are basically owners of Mayer Properties, and we bought the house to rehab it and have completely rehabbed the inside, which included foundational work. And the house, actually the picture shown has a for sale sign up front, and have had it up for sale, and it's not moved. Or if anybody knows that reason, they can let me know. But my daughter Marissa proposed we do an Airbnb with it, and she will be managing that for us, and we'll keep the property up. And of course, you want to keep those nice. And it's about 2,000 square feet with a large master with the view there you see off the balcony on the top. It's a great view of downtown, and another bedroom upstairs. And there's a bedroom / office downstairs without a closet right now. It is a window. It probably works more as a small office than a bedroom, but could be a bedroom. And then a large living area with dining and things. And so all new wood floors, all new painting, a lot of new sheetrock. The plumbing is new. And so we rehabbed it and want to basically have it available on Airbnb. It's not too far from downtown. And so we think it would have a lot of good clientele. We believe it would sleep 8. Probably won't get groups that large all the time, but for a family or a small corporate retreat, and those who are in for conferences, conventions, and trade shows. So my understanding, the only reason we need an adjustment is that we actually don't live there, and that it's a home share of a residence we do not live in. And so we were asking for the exception so that we can offer it up in an Airbnb business.
Okay. The application talks about how there's off-street parking, obviously on 30th. I don't think anyone's going to be parking, but could you just agree to a condition that it's only going to be advertised as off-street parking? Would that be a problem for you?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah,
we can understand that. Certainly, it's a busy street. Yes.
Yeah, there's 30th, but also, maybe your guests might park in some of the other residential areas or something.
Yes.
So, which Paseos, as it gets more and more popular, there are more and more parking issues. So that would help a lot. It's a fantastic area. I think it's I'm not aware of too many Airbnbs kind of in this area, but it seems like a great area for an Airbnb.
Well, my daughter's selling me on.
Yeah, I mean, because people can go downtown or they can walk to the Paseo or whatever they want to do. So seems like a great area. How long of a period of time are you? So the code allows us to do it up to 10 years. We've never approved one up to 10 years. In this area, probably 2 to 3-ish years I would be comfortable with, but how many years were you hoping to get?
That is a question we hadn't really even considered. And I guess we'd be willing to look at whatever time period makes sense. We probably still will keep it up for sale. And so it may become someone purchase it. I would see that we certainly be evaluating how well it does. And so I guess I'd 2 or 3. I mean, of course, I'd probably want 3 just to give myself time not to have to come back. But
yeah. Yeah, understood. Board members, any questions or comments? I did have, I think, someone sign up to speak on this application, but any questions or comments of the applicant? Okay.
Chair, we had Judith Matthews.
Okay.
Hi, is it my turn? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Hi. So I live at 525 Northwest 30th. And there's actually many Airbnbs in the area, including the home in this picture with a blue siding and a red door. So my fear about this becoming an Airbnb is that we're going to become an Airbnb district where we're owner occupied, our other neighbors are owner occupied. We're seeing more and more children live in this area. My neighbor and I both gave birth to children this year or last year, excuse me. So we're very nervous about having two Airbnbs permanently right next to each other, neither of which is owner occupied, and it becoming maybe they're rented together and then maybe there's 10 or 12 people that are part of this setup. It's unfortunate that house is priced higher than many other things in the area. That may be why it's not moving. But having another short-term rental so close on the same block is not something I or the neighbors that I've talked to want. We'd be totally fine with this being a long-term rental property, but I just don't think this is set up with that. Parking is a huge issue for us, and there's just 2 adults living in my house. It's very crowded. It's hard to turn off of. And while I know the Paseo is very popular, that's why I live there. We need a community in the area and not just rentals, not just short-term tourists there. We need the community that makes the Paseo such an important place to live. So my fear is that we're going to become inundated with people that try to buy flips overpriced, put a lot of work into them, can't sell them, decide to go into an Airbnb market, and then all my neighbors will just be there for 2 nights and I won't have any stability in the neighborhood.
Okay. I appreciate your comments, and I am highly in tune with that happening in this area. I don't know if you followed the dispute at City Council where the City Council approved home sharing, but that was a primary concern, at least one that spoke to me, is you lose that sense of neighborhood. And especially in the Paseo, of all areas, I would not want that to happen. And so I am definitely highly in tune to trying or to kind of watching that and making sure that doesn't happen in certain areas. From my perspective, what the City Council approved was the ability to have a few Airbnbs kind of in each neighborhood mixed around, but acknowledging that they would not want the realization of your fear, which is you have a street in the Paseo that's all Airbnbs, right? They don't want that to happen. And I think that's why they had this board take over the role of approving the special exception so that we can keep an eye on that happening. Right now, I don't know that we're there yet in the Paseo and on this street. And so I don't know that it necessarily defeats this application. But again, that to me is probably the strongest point against allowing Airbnbs in general, home sharing in general, is not turning streets or neighborhoods into short-term rentals and kind of glorified hotels instead of actually neighborhoods. So yes, I see your hands raised.
So on this 500 block of 30th, there's only maybe 9 or 10 houses. What would tip the balance to there being too many in your estimation?
Yeah, that's for the board to decide. I don't think that we have a full number, and I hate to employ this standard that I've heard employed in courts, for example, but it's one of those things that you know it when you see it. And so, 2 to me, 2 or 3 is getting up there. If we start looking at like half of the street becoming short-term rentals, I would personally would not be comfortable with that, although I'm only one board member. So I don't know if you have evidence of that now. The problem is some of these were grandfathered in before the City Council passed the new code regulation. So we don't we haven't seen some of those that have been grandfathered in, but we have seen and have tried to keep track of the newer applications that have happened kind of in the last year. Does that make sense?
Well, certainly, but I mean, to me, what would happen to my property value if half of the block were Airbnbs? That sounds extreme to me. One is wonderful, and we've encouraged people to stay there, but having two on the same block immediately next to each other really does start to tip it over that it does seem like an Airbnb block, and that's really unfortunate. We want to live in this community. We've been living in the Paseo for over 10 years and at this house for almost 5.
Okay. Board members, questions or comments? Ms. Matthews?
I would just say that it's not granted in perpetuity. It'll be, whatever year we set, and then, if there's problems or more come in, we get to relook at it and reevaluate.
Yeah. And I was a bit generous with the 2 to 3 year thing. I know the board members that have seen this before in some of the historic areas, not saying this is a historic area, but in a sense it is, and it's definitely a district. The historic areas, I kind of mean Mesta, Crown Heights, things like that. There are heightened restrictions on certain things. But in these kind of, we'll call them hotter areas and districts, we've allowed much shorter special exceptions so that we can see how things manifest and see if it's as bad as some of the protests think that they're going to be, or if they're not, if it's better and people like it. There are arguments around the world that Airbnbs on home values actually have the opposite impact, and that they actually increase home prices too much so that they price out the existing residents because the home values are inflated because of the home sharing use. And so that, just to kind of see how all of that shakes out, we tend to grant shorter special exceptions in specific districts like these. So for this one, it would be for a shorter period of time if it were approved. But I saw that you had your hand raised again, Ms. Matthews.
Yeah, my question was, could you grant it just to be a year or a much shorter time period than you had previously mentioned?
Yeah, no, we've done that before as well. So that'll just be up to the majority of the board to see what they'd be comfortable with, if they're even comfortable approving it in the first place. So while we've got you, and as someone who knows the area and stuff, are there any, I can't think of any, but are there any restrictions that would make this use more palatable for the neighbors? So a lot of times the neighbors have certain concerns that can be addressed through certain conditions, and the board can condition approval pretty much any way we want, and impose different restrictions. So the parking one, to me, in this area seemed like a necessary restriction that we needed to impose. But other than that, I can't think of any. But did you have any while we have you on the line?
I mean, I don't know what you've done in the past. I'm sorry that I wasn't prepared to answer that question. If you could mention some, maybe something would appeal to me. The Airbnb at 529 has extensive landscaping, and those people are over there multiple times a week taking care of them. Anything that sort of improves the neighborhood would be and probably improve the resale value and curb appeal in that way too. So something like that would be nice. The parking really is, he talks about a corporate retreat, but there's no place for that many cars to be. So I don't know what restrictions there've been, but I'd be happy to hear about them.
Yes, I think some of the more common ones are in areas that make sense. And this, to me, doesn't necessarily qualify, but restricting how it can be advertised. So, restricting it to being advertised as only up to so many people or so many rooms or things like that.
It would be great to have multi-night stays. The one next door, always on weekends, has a multi-night stay as a minimum requirement. Adding something like that, so it's not like a one party, that it really is people that are here for, so it's not a party, is really one of our concerns.
Okay. And I'll mention to you, I mean, these are conditions of the special exception in the event they're approved. Enforceability becomes an issue, right? But the thought from our perspective is, if we condition the approval on certain things, it'll be a deterrent from people going against those restrictions, because if they're in violation of the restrictions, they have to come back in front of the board and we can revoke the special exception. So enforcement is sometimes an issue, but we still like to impose them for a deterrent reason, and it gives some kind of comfort to the rest of the neighborhood. So we'll talk about what you've mentioned as a board, but I appreciate your comments. The applicant, I think you pronounced it Mayor.
Yes, mayor, like mayor of a city. So, turn the H upside down. It's spelled with an H. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, if you wanted to address any of the concerns that were mentioned by the board and otherwise.
Well, yes, I don't know that what I can do about other people making their places Airbnb, and that there's certainly, we've already had some restrictions with no smoking inside, and the landscaping. Of course, you want to make the place attractive, and we want to actually make the property values more valuable. That's in our best interest, we think. And we are planning, I don't know about restricting this, but we are planning to have incentives to do multiple night stays, weekends, or even like 5 days, 4 days of the week, and don't want a lot of in and out traffic anyway. But one of the ideas about parking is there is an area in the back that can be a patio added for parking, which we have considered. But I could see restricting no parking below the level of the sidewalk or something would be very reasonable, or something restricting the egress or whatever it's called down the driveway. And that would naturally limit some of it. It will have a limit of 8 people, which may come in one vehicle, or may, in some places it's 8 vehicles, which I think would be too many, and you wouldn't end up. You'd have to have them, carpool, and I would think most groups will come in as a family group or carpooling.
Okay. Yeah, I think there would be, if you had any more than 8, I'd start having some concerns. If you offered it as more than 8, 8 is about the limit, but I think it's still reasonable. And I think you probably, kind of like what you said, a couple of people would Uber over and maybe someone drives over, but you'd probably have 2 to 3 cars in that driveway maximum most of the time. But if you advertised it as off-street parking only, that would disincentivize anyone who wants to bring 8 cars, because they're just gonna have to find another place.
And just, certainly we're limited parking is something that is a historic district, and we put on there, we don't want noise at night and after 10, and some things that we want to. We think the aesthetics of the neighborhood is one of the biggest attractions, and want to keep it very nice.
Yeah, and there's also the element that I don't want you to take this the wrong way, and it's meant as a way to help your application, but you don't strike me as someone who bought this property just to turn it into an Airbnb like we see sometimes. You seem to have bought it to then sell or have someone live in it that or whatever, but not necessarily to turn into an Airbnb. So I'm not too concerned about this being an Airbnb commercial operation for the next 10 years, like I am with some applications that we see. So that's in your favor. I mean, I'll kind of cut to the chase. I'm highly kind of skeptical of this area developing in the wrong ways. And so I'm going to kind of watch these applications, and have always watched these applications pretty strictly, but I can get on board with seeing how it goes for a year. And with the parking restrictions we've talked about in this meeting, I could get on board with it for up to a year. I don't know if did you have another comment? I saw your hand raised, but Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, well, and I had a question coming in, and I think I just want to bring it up. I was looking at it being, asking if it would be transferable to a new owner, to wondering if make the project, the house more attractive to a buyer. And with the concerns that Judith Matthews brought up, that, that could be a restriction that's not transferable, or something in light of that. And that way you'd have to review a new owner and what they do.
Okay. That makes sense to me. I forget off the top of my head whether these carry with the property or with the applicant. So
yeah,
that's
what a question I had. Yeah.
Yeah. So Cindy, JJ, or Rita?
They run with the property.
Okay. So we would want to condition it on this applicant. Again, enforceability being one thing, but it would be conditioned on this applicant only. So, potentially, the applicant has offered that, and so the board can discuss it. Ms. Matthews, before we wrap up, your comment? I think you're on mute.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. My question is, will it be transferable if there is a new owner, or will it not be? Sorry, we kind of felt like we went back and forth there.
Yeah, so the applicant has offered to make it not transferable. So I think that gives you some comfort.
Is that what he's offering? Sorry, I didn't understand that.
No,
I thought he was
he
saying that
did.
might be attractive to a new owner.
No, he proposed that it.
I wanted it to be, but based on your comments, that's
Okay.
what I offered up, not to.
Anything that leads to owner occupied is what I want to get to. So yeah, making it not transferable would be better.
Yeah,
I understand the concern with not being permanent, but I could see the place becoming an attractive Airbnb property right where it is, right? And it's.
Yeah, and they depending on how the board deliberates, would have to come back in front of the board. So
yeah.
I think we've heard enough. So I appreciate all the comments that we've heard so far. Board members, questions or comments so far as we deliberate?
Is there anyone else to speak or another protest?
I didn't have anyone else signed up to speak, and I didn't see any hands raised. I'll wait for a couple of moments. If there's anyone else on the line who was hoping to speak on this application, you can use the raise your hand function now. Okay. So board members, questions or comments? I mean, to me, it makes sense to condition it based on the things we've discussed in this meeting, and then a period of 1 year seems reasonable to me, but
yeah, that works for me.
Yeah, I'll try to make a motion and see if I got it all. I'm going to move approval for 1 year, subject to not transferable, personal to this owner, and that it's advertised maximum of 8 persons, no parking on the street. And then there's a short list of self-imposed rules in the application. I'd like to include that in the advertising. And I think I got what I heard. That's my motion.
I'll second.
okay. We've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case number 14847 for the reason that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 1 year on the conditions that the property will not be advertised as having on-street parking. So it'll be advertised as off-street parking only. The special exception will not be transferable. The property will be advertised as sleeping a maximum of 8 people. And the special exception will also implement the self-imposed restrictions that are stated in the application. Once you're able to, cast your votes, please.
Mr. Privet, how do you vote?
Vote yes. My pan's not coming up.
And it's approved. Thank you.
Okay, item 10, case 14849. It's an application by Tricord Investment to permit home sharing at 4512 South Robinson Avenue.
Okay, is the applicant on the line?
Yes, I'm here. This is Cherie Whitna, and at 3009 Southwest 124th, Oklahoma City. I'm making an application for home sharing on a property at 4512 South Robinson. We would like to, this has been a rental property for many years. We've recently gone in and remodeled this property, and we'd like to go ahead and make this part of our corporate housing program. We have other properties that we've done that's corporate properties that are for companies that are needing to do training or meetings for their employees. And this particular one is not too far from the hospital on 44th and Western. So what we thought would be good. We have had physicians needing to have a place when they're in temporary residency, different things like that. And then also there are people that we understand when they're needing to stay with their loved one or next to their loved one to check on them. They need places. So we thought that would be good as well. This is only, let's see, this is really, it's right off of Robinson. So it goes Robinson, Walker, Western, very close to what I call South Community still. Let's see, it's Integris. So that's our plan. It's a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, so it would most likely be, you know, just for a small family to stay. And I don't know if I'm on my phone, so I don't know if you've got the pictures there, but it's got ample parking. Right now, we're in the process of getting some fences, some new gates that were blown down, put back up, and that's the plan. So, can you hear me?
Yes. Is that property? That's great. It looks like a duplex.
It is a duplex.
Is the do you own the property? I assume that the property next door.
All of it together.
Okay, and then is this for half of it or the whole?
Well, right now, we've only done the remodel on one side of. So no, the whole plan is to do the whole duplex for. Its address is 4512, and we're going to keep it all together. So right now, we have someone living on one side, and she's getting some arrangements for different housing that she has. Her husband's been hurt. They're going to get certain kind of housing, which is for their medical. So I really don't. I signed some papers for her, but I'm not really familiar with it too much. It's not Section 8. It's another program for people that have injury. So that's what she's doing. And as soon as that unit becomes available, then we will do both of them. And that way we can have either a family that needs 4 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms total, or we can have it as, just rent the one side, or however that would work.
Okay. JJ, would they need to come for another special exception for the other half? I'm not sure if this is 2 different addresses.
And this is one address, and we've always had it that way. It's so what we would do is when we advertise it, once we get the other side, we would be advertising it as 4 bedrooms. And you could probably get 1, 2, I think you can get 5 cars across there if And they're also too deep. I don't know if you had anybody go out and measure it, but it's, I don't even think anyone's going to ever have that many cars to take up the space and go onto the street ever, because it's a large.
Yeah, no, yeah, there are photos in here. So, I mean, I'm looking at it online right now as well. So yeah, it's a huge driveway. I'm just wondering if it's an application for 2 or 4 bedrooms, and it looks like you're giving yourself the option to do 2 or 4, which for our purposes, for deliberation would be 4.
Okay, well, yeah, to have it for the whole address, because when she moves out very soon, that will be remodeled and it will be as 4 bedrooms total.
Okay. Board members, questions or comments?
Just need the years, I guess, how long we're gonna grant it for.
I couldn't hear that. What was that? Was that a question?
I would just a term on how long we want to grant this.
Oh, I was hoping for 3 years.
Yeah. Did you say 3 years?
Well, I was hoping because, you know, this, I think it's going to be something that's going to be good for the hospital. And what we normally do is we go advertise to the corporate places, let them know we have corporate housing fully furnished. And we've already had some physicians on other properties, not this particular one, but we would go to that particular hospital and let them know that we have this so close. And then if they have people that are wanting to, you know, be next to their loved one, or if they do have a resident, then, you know, a family could accommodate everyone, and it would be very close to the hospital. That was our thinking.
Yeah, so it sounds like 3 years. Board members, any questions or comments? Is there anyone else on the line that was wanting to speak on this application? Okay, seeing none, I can get on board with 3 years. That's kind of what I had in mind as well for this one. Board members, so questions, comments, or a motion?
I would move approval of case number 14849 for the reasons that it meets the statutory conditions for a special exception for short-term rental. And I think the conditions were for a period of 3 years, no off-street parking, and it advertised for a maximum of 4 bedrooms.
Okay, and then just so municipal counselor doesn't hit me over the wrists, on the parking issue, I think technically you said no off street, but you meant no on street.
Oh,
Exactly. Thank you.
Meant on street.
Okay. Yeah, they must park on the city street. No. Okay, so no on street parking, so off street parking only. 4 bedrooms and for a period of 3 years. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to approve the special exception in case number 14849 for the reason it meets statutory conditions for a special exception for a period of 3 years on the condition that they'll be advertised as off-street parking only and up to 4 bedrooms. Once you're able to, cast your votes. And it's approved.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
You too. Thanks. The next application was withdrawn, which takes us to additional items. And I think Cindy had an additional item.
Well, we just are going to go back to in-person meetings in the chamber effective June the 3rd. So our meeting in June.
Okay, so one more remote meeting and then we're back in person.
Yes.
Okay.
Cindy, do you know when planning's going back? Just curious while we're here.
It's effective June the 3rd, so it would be that meeting
Okay,
after.
anything after that? Gotcha.
We're the first one in the chamber.
The Board of Adjustment is?
Yes.
Okay, good. And we'll get to use the new tech and all that stuff, which is good. I was going to raise this issue in other business, just seeing when we return. So it sounds like we already have that answer. So is there any other discussion on that, returning to in-person? Okay.
Well, good. And vaccinated, ready.
Yeah, I'm ready to be back as well. So I like the remote, but I think being back will help for a lot of the applications we see. So next item, communications and board reports. I don't have anything on board committees, board members, or municipal counselor. Is there anything anyone wanted to raise under that section? Okay. Any citizens to be heard that are still on the line? Okay. Any other business? All right, we're adjourned. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you. We'll see
May
you,
20th.
yeah, remotely May 20th, and then in person after that.
All right.